The Abandoned Mill, a personal account.
I've always thought of myself as a rational person. Sure, I can get spooked, but I always look for a logical explanation. If a door slams in an empty building, it's a draft. If someone swears they saw a figure in the window, it's light, shadows, or their imagination. At least that's how I used to think. Until one night in 2013. That was the first time I realized not everything fits neatly into a box. This happened at an old textile mill on the edge of town. The place is huge. A multi-story brick block with soot-stained patches up the walls and deep black window openings that look like empty eye sockets. It shut down after a fire years ago. Since then, it's been sitting there, rotting away. Supposedly, it was going to be torn down, but like a lot of things in this town, it never happened. People have been telling stories about it for years. Some say you can hear footsteps inside even when no one's there. Others talk about doors welded shut from the inside, with deep scratch marks on the metal. A few claim to have seen shadows moving in the hallways. I always chalked it up to urban legends. That night, my buddy Oleg and I decided to go in and film a short video for the internet. The plan was simple: walk the first floor, maybe go up to the second, get a few shots, and leave. We picked just before sunset to make it look atmospheric. The walk there took us past the train tracks and into the industrial zone, rows of garages, empty lots, chain-link fences, and weeds pushing up through cracked asphalt. When we got close, the sun was low, hitting the brickwork with this deep reddish light. A bent danger and unsafe structure sign hung loosely on the gate. The yard was overgrown. We circled to the left side of the building and found a gap in the fence. The air inside the yard smelled stale, like a mix of damp concrete and rust. The temperature dropped a little, which was weird because the day had been hot. We went in through a side door that was hanging off its hinges. Immediately, we were standing in the main production floor, a huge echoing space filled with long rows of old machines. Most were coated in dust and rust. Some were just stripped down frames. Bits of belt straps, broken glass, and scraps of cloth littered the floor. A few wires dangled from the ceiling like vines. I pulled out my phone, switched on the flashlight, and started filming. Oleg walked a few steps ahead. Every sound, our shoes, the crunch of glass, bounced back from the walls, making it sound like someone else was moving nearby. At the far end of the floor, we found a staircase. The steps were metal, worn down but solid. We climbed to the second floor. A long hallway stretched both ways. Most of the doors were busted open, but one stopped us cold. It was a heavy steel door, welded shut from the other side. The weld seams were old and dark, but across the rust were fresh scratches, deep parallel lines, evenly spaced, like someone had dragged something sharp across it. Below that was a smudged handprint, from the inside. I was about to get a close-up when, somewhere deeper down the hallway, a door slammed. Hard. The sound was heavy, not the kind of noise wind makes. We froze. Then, up on the third floor, we saw a light flick on. Oleg whispered that we should leave, but I wanted to know how any light in this building could even work, so we went up. The third floor stairs were narrow. The handrails were coated in a thick black soot or dust that stuck to your skin. At the top was a landing with an old table, a chipped coffee mug, and a bulky early 2000s security monitor. It was on. The screen flickered with static. It showed a hallway, our hallway. About half a second later, two figures appeared on the feed. Us, caught in the beam of my phone's flashlight. That tiny delay made my skin crawl. Oleg stepped over to the console, tried pressing buttons, but nothing changed. The feed stayed locked on us. Then the hallway light flickered and went out. The building went completely silent. Even that faint hollow hum you get in big empty places was gone. And in that silence, we both heard it. Breathing, slow, heavy, uneven, and it was coming from just behind us. I spun around with the flashlight. The beam swept across the wall, the door frame, nothing there. But on the screen, half a second behind, the beam stopped on a figure in the doorway. It was shaped like a person, but the head was tilted sharply to one side, the neck stretched at an unnatural angle. We both stepped back. The monitor glitched, the image rolled once, then came back. Now the doorway was empty. We didn't run, but we didn't waste time either. Heading for the stairs, I slid my hand down the rail. The soot smeared across my skin, but in it were marks, finger tracks. Long, thin, dragging lines, like someone had gone down these stairs slowly, carefully, gripping tight. We reached the first floor. The air down there was damp and carried that basement-like smell, cold and stale. We stepped outside. The air outside was warm again, carrying the scent of grass and maybe wood smoke from somewhere far off. We walked around the building and headed toward the street. It was darker now, the mill's brick walls fading into the night sky. Neither of us spoke until we were a few blocks away. That night at home, I pulled the footage up on my laptop. Everything looked the same as I remembered, until I got to the part where I turned the flashlight toward the doorway. For just one frame, maybe less than a second, something was on the floor. A hand, thin, pale, with fingers too long, too straight. Then it was gone. I saved the file, put it in its own folder. I still have it. Every once in a while, I watch it again. And every time when the light lands on that empty doorway, I wait to see if the hand will stay in frame just a little longer this time. I don't know what we saw that night. I don't know who or what could have been inside that building. But I do know this. Ever since that day, I find myself avoiding looking too long into reflections. Store windows, dark TV screens, even video calls. Because sometimes, and I swear this is real, the reflection seems to lag. Just a fraction of a second. The same way that old security monitor did. And I really don't want to know why.
Water on the Roof, a personal account.
I never planned to stay in that hotel longer than one night. I needed to be downtown, meeting in the morning, early flight out, and the cheaper options in that area are always close to the addresses I need. The facade was old-fashioned, with decorative cornices and a faded sign. The lobby smelled faintly of furniture polish and damp carpet. Behind the front desk, a tired-looking guy barely glanced up from his screen. The elevator moved in little jerks. Someone had scratched something into the panel with a key or a knife. On the 5th floor, it hesitated, and for just a second I felt the cab tilt, a small, strange sideways shift. The doors slid open slowly like there wasn't enough air pressure in the shaft. The room was long and narrow like a train car. The window looked out onto a light well, a narrow shaft between walls, dim even during the day. In the bathroom, the water ran in bursts, a steady stream, then a hiss, then a thin brown ripple at the bottom of the sink. I chalked it up to old plumbing. I turned on the TV for background noise, tossed a glass in the sink, checked the deadbolt. It was stiff, like no one had touched it in months. I stayed up late. Through the wall, I could faintly hear someone's alarm clock ticking, and cold air drifted in from the hallway. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a click, like a pump starting up somewhere. A second of silence, then a low hum through the pipes and a thin drip from the bathroom ceiling. I got up and went in. A single drop had landed on the tile. It looked almost black in the moonlight. In my hand, it felt like regular water, but it had a metallic taste. By morning, everything seemed more normal. The lobby, the coffee machine, people with rolling luggage. But there was a nervous edge to the conversations. A couple arguing with the desk clerk. No pressure, water smells, why is it coming out brown? The guy at the desk just smiled politely. We're flushing the system. Some people looked annoyed, others just grossed out, but everyone had places to be. I asked if I could see the view from the fitness room upstairs. Closed for maintenance, sir, he said without looking up. What about roof access? Closed. The answer was so quick it felt rehearsed. That afternoon, I cut through a side street and saw the hotel from the back. There was a fire escape. The top flights blocked off with a metal grate and a padlock, but the lower section was open, one railing bent out of place. I lingered for a moment, listening. Street noise outside, nothing from within. Back in my room, the shower was sputtering again. While I waited for the water to warm, I noticed a gray ring around the faucet, like sediment. It rinsed off, but left a faint roughness on my fingers. I didn't drink it. I used bottled water to wash my face. That evening, I caught the elevator on the second floor. When the doors opened, there was a folded maintenance ladder lying in the corner, as if someone had left it in a rush. I held the door with my sleeve, thinking I'd pull it out, but on the back wall, I noticed 5 parallel marks in the dust, straight and evenly spaced like someone had dragged a hand down the wall. Small detail, but unsettling. I let go of the sleeve. The door shut, then reopened like the elevator had changed its mind. That night I woke to the sound of water, like someone had dumped a bucket into a hollow tank. The vibration echoed through the walls. In the bathroom, the tap was running clean and steady now. Above me, something heavy was being moved across a metal surface with pauses in between. After a few minutes, silence. In the morning, the hallway smelled of chlorine. The door to a maintenance room was ajar. Inside was a narrow metal staircase leading up. Warm, humid air drifted down. A crooked, authorized personnel only sign hung to one side, with a fresh scratch along the edge like from a key. Through the gap at the top, a pale rectangle of daylight. I told myself I'd take 5 minutes before checking out. Back in the room, I grabbed my phone, slipped on my jacket, and went back to the maintenance door. The steps rang underfoot. The air thickened and grew warmer. At the top was a metal door with an inside latch. A thin line of daylight slipped in through the side. The latch turned easily, like it had been oiled recently. Outside, it was hotter than I expected. A flat roof, a few puddles, a low parapet wall, and scattered ventilation housings. On the far side were 4 large metal cylinders glistening with condensation, raised up on a steel frame. I knew right away they were water tanks, the kind used for autonomous supply. As I got closer, I felt the warm, damp air coming off them, like a pond in the afternoon. One hatch was locked. 2 others had heavy clamps in place. The third wasn't quite closed. The edge tilted up slightly, as if it had been lowered awkwardly and not secured. On the metal surface were fine parallel streaks with small notches along them, like someone had been gripping and sliding inch by inch. I didn't touch it. I looked around. No cameras, just old antenna brackets. A few feet away was a small locked shed, and next to it on the roof lay a faded towel, like it had been left to dry and forgotten. From the street, it would be nearly impossible to reach this roof without going through the building. Back downstairs, the lobby was noisy. A couple of tourists were arguing loudly. Someone was asking for a discount. As I passed, I caught a fragment. "They're checking the water because of complaints." The clerk nodded, repeating, "Routine flushing." I checked out that afternoon. When I asked for the receipt, the clerk looked up and paused for half a second, like he recognized me, though we'd never really spoken. "Have a good day," he said, too formal. I nodded, stepped outside, and breathed in the hot, asphalt-heavy air. A few days later, back home, I saw a short article online. The hotel had been conducting maintenance on its water system after guest complaints about taste and pressure. The write-up was vague. No confirmations, no denials of the rumors, just "work is underway." I scrolled past it, then went back and read it again. The words didn't change, but the feeling that something was being left out stayed with me. I pulled up the short clips I'd filmed on the roof. One showed me walking toward the tanks. The other was a close-up of the ribbed hatch. In the sun's glare, you could see the streaks along the edge, polished smooth like from repeated contact. Zooming in, there were tiny darker marks like the kind you'd see if fingers had been digging in. I showed the clip to a friend who works in building maintenance. He said, "Usually there aren't hand marks on the lids. You open them with the lever from the outside. If someone was sliding off, it means they were holding it from the inside." He paused, then added, "Or maybe someone below the platform was tugging while it was being closed." We both knew the second explanation didn't really make sense. I've never gone back to that hotel. When I drive past, I try to guess where the maintenance stairwell is that leads to the roof. On warm days, you can sometimes see people smoking on the neighboring rooftops, waving to each other across the street. I've never seen anyone on this one. Sometimes when I turn on the tap at night and the water takes longer than usual to come through, I remember that deep thud in the pipes, like something large dropped into a hollow tank. And when I linger in an elevator for just a second too long, I remember those parallel streaks on the hatch. I'm not sure I want to know why they were there and what exactly they were checking that day.